my backyard, I have a pecan grove. I want to have grass, but my dog had other plans. When we first got her, we found out that she copes with our leaving by running as fast as she can. And this is all well and good until we got a bunch of rain like we did the spring we got her. All of a sudden, this rich, beautiful, thick lawn became a dust bowl, and I became a grass farmer. I did a decent enough job of planting some ryegrass at the end of last summer, which helped get rid of all the dust for the winter. But this summer, when the heat came, it burned up all my grass. So I got some St. Augustine seed and went back to grass farming. And before I knew it, I had little green things sprouting up everywhere. Some of it grass, some of it weeds, but most of it pecan trees. Preparing the soil and watering it every day works great for growing grass. The problem is that it also provides a great environment for the pecans planted by the squirrels. I can't stop watering the yard because then I would, while I would indeed kill the pecan saplings, I would also kill my baby grass. So I go out and I hand pick the pecan trees. Some of these trees come up easily. They don't have they don't have too much to them, and so they come up and I have one less tree taking up the nutrients from my precious grass. Others I have to really work. I have calluses on my hands from pulling them up. And when they finally do come up, they have an extremely long taproot, and it's actually very satisfying when I see these come up. But still others are so firmly rooted that all that happens is I pull off the top of the plant. The root is still there. I have just succeeded in kicking the can down the road, and now I wait until it grows back enough that I can give it another go. This actually represents the majority of the pecan trees in my backyard. I know the best way to remove them is going to take the most effort on my part. I'm going to have to get a little shovel and dig them out. There are dozens of these things. So I see a large backache in my future as I have to stoop down over and over to dig out these stupid little plants. If I don't do it now, then I will have a whole mess of trouble cutting down these things, so I need to do it. Even worse, if I was simply to say this is too much work, I'm going to have a forest now in my backyard and I'm okay with that, they would more than likely kill me as all these pecans eventually reach maturity and start to pollinate, and then my lungs close up so fast I wouldn't even notice. I would just be there standing in my backyard 1 minute, take a deep breath, and all of a sudden I think, wow, what are you doing here, Jesus? I didn't think you were coming till later. I don't need to add to their numbers. So while they're still small, I need to do the hard work and prevent them from getting any bigger so that my good grass can grow. And in fact, while the grass was there, the pecan problem wasn't nearly so bad because the grass was able to prevent most of them from reaching the dirt. And what did get to the dirt and try to grow was either choked out by the good grass or cut down by the mower. And all of this brings me to our gospel lesson today. This one really hits home to me as I am in the midst of all this growing. Notice in the parable that there is a single seed sown by the man. This refers to the deposit of faith. This is why apostolic succession is important. I have a list in my office of the list of who laid hands on me in my ordination. It's very simple. Bishop Iger, he did that. And then the list goes on to who laid hands on him, and who laid hands on him, and who laid hands on him all through the history of the diocese through the history of the denomination, through the history of the church, all the way back to Jesus. It really is a cool little document. But while as cool as this is, who laid hands on whom isn't exactly as important as it is the tracking of the information. What is important is that the faith of the church is supposed to be passed down along with this laying on of hands. And this faith can be traced back to the original deposit of faith given from Jesus to his disciples. This is what is so important about that one seed. It is the teaching of the kingdom of heaven, the Catholic faith. The weeds are sown by the enemy while the man was sleeping. This refers to the church asleep at the wheel and allowing doctrine and other things than the Catholic faith to creep in. The problem with these weeds is that if you don't get at them early, just like the pecans in my backyard, they start to take over and choke out the good faith. The problem is that heresy is believable because on the surface, it looks believable. It's not until it matures that you notice the danger. And by that time, the roots run deep and require a major endeavor to fully remove it. The various heresies are the weeds of the enemy. They give the impression of substance, a nice green plant, but a nice green plant that lacks fruit. The weeds may even come up faster and look more beautiful in comparison to the life-giving seed of God, but they produce no life and only sap the nutrients of the field of your soul. For example, in the Old Testament, over and over and over, we see the people of God playing the prostitute with various gods of the surrounding people. They did so because these gods require nothing of them more than carnal pleasures. They have the question, need a good harvest in the coming year? Go pray to the fertility god of Baal by fornicating with a temple prostitute. Your wife will understand this is gardening after all. This is religion. It has nothing to do with family bonds. Is it any wonder why Israel constantly had to combat this problem? Because contrast this form of worship with that of the God of Israel. A religion without limits in comparison to one replete with them. 613 do's and don'ts. And this weed has taken deep root in the world, and as even though the religious aspects are now far removed from this act, its permissiveness is so prevalent today. Why become a Christian and have to wait until marriage and then only with that one person for the rest of your life when sowing one's oats is much more pleasurable? Just look at the fruit of these weeds. Can they be called good in any aspect today other than self-indulgence? Has all this liberation led to life? Or has it just choked out everything around it to the point where the good seed has to struggle daily for its existence? This is the problem with the weeds of heresy. What is needed now is the hard work of rooting out the weeds. It is backbreaking work that leads to the rest of the work, that looks to the rest of the world as one crazy man building a giant ark on his landlocked lot. But now that the lack of fruit is plain, maybe it has become easier to convince that self-indulgence in the marital act outside the marital bond is indeed detrimental as originally believed. In my attempt to regrow the yard, I have now realized that not only do I need to remove the pecan trees, but to aid in the grass production, I need to use squares of sod. In terms of Christianity, this would be equivalent to groups of tightly bound Christians dedicated to the growing of the kingdom. My job as priest is to feed and water the faithful and to allow us all to take over the yard with the goodness of the gospel. This has the added benefit of greening up the yard of bunches, adding it in squares of sod. And as the yard starts to look green again, hope springs eternal. And then the task of digging out the heretical pecan trees doesn't seem so daunting because I can do it in small sections. And the task of winning the world to Christ through gardening, which is essentially what both of these parables are about today, Jesus's and mine, it always takes vigilance to maintain the crop. One never knows when an enemy will sneak in and sow weeds among the good seed to slowly choke out the good seed. Or when a sweet but rather stupid dog will come and destroy the whole thing in a season. But when it does happen, we can either lament about it, lament about the fact that it is not like it used to be, or to give up on the whole thing and essentially just kick the can down the line and force someone else to have to deal with it and then work that much harder. Or we can roll up our sleeves and get to the work of taking over the world for Christ. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.